Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Memory Lane Media, the channel where we walk together into the past, uncovering the stories that shaped our world. Tonight, let us journey into the remarkable life of a man who dared to dream of conquering the skies. His name was Glenn L. Martin. It all began on a quiet January night in 1886. Minta Martin, living in the small town of Maxburg, had a dream unlike any other. She dreamt of flying. In her vision, she soared gracefully through the sky, gliding above the rooftops of her neighbors, waving to the people below who looked on in awe and sadness, unable to rise from the earth as she did. 17 years would pass before the Wright brothers made their historic first flight at Kitty Hawk. Yet in that dream, there was already a spark, a foreshadowing of what was to come. For Minta's son, born later, would indeed lift himself into the heavens, becoming one of America's earliest aviators. The strangest thing of all was how destiny unfolded. Not long after the Wrights had proven that man could indeed take to the air, Minta's boy, Glenn L. Martin, became the third person in the United States to fly an airplane he had built with his own hands. But Martin's story is not merely about invention. It is about persistence, courage, and the fire of ambition. He would rise from the prairies of Kansas to the forefront of the aviation industry, his name etched alongside the pioneers who gave mankind wings. From his earliest childhood, Martin's life seemed bound to the winds. Kansas, where he grew up, was a land of tempests. Storms swept across the plains with unrelenting force, shaping the very character of those who lived there. Young Glenn, rather than fearing those storms, sought to master them. At just 6 years old, he fastened a sail onto a little red wagon, and to the amazement of onlookers, let the Kansas wind carry him down the street as though he was steering a sailboat upon a great river. That moment, so simple and playful, marked the birth of a fascination that would consume his life. Even as a child, Glenn took responsibility for his dreams. He did not wait for others to give him what he desired. When he longed for a pair of ice skates, but could not afford them, he borrowed tools from a blacksmith, forged the blades himself, and built his own pair. When he wanted a kite, he made one, and not just any kite. He invented new designs, with extra wings and supports, that soared higher and straighter than the rest. Pride filled his heart as he watched his creations rise into the sky. Neighbors admired his ingenuity, and Glenn, even as a boy, tasted the joy of success born from one's own labor. Every evening, in his mother's kitchen, he built kites to sell. For each one, he paid his mother back a portion of the cost, and slowly he learned the balance of work, responsibility, and independence. Through those small kites, he developed not only his mechanical skills, but also the confidence that he could achieve what others might consider impossible. Years later, when he became one of the most renowned aircraft builders in the world, Martin would look back and say, "My mother gave me confidence. She encouraged me to make kites in the kitchen. She helped me believe." By the time automobiles appeared in Kansas, Glenn had turned his fascination to the ground. He longed to drive one of those new machines. Soon he was working in a repair shop, learning every detail of their engines. When his family moved to Santa Ana, California, he opened his own garage, selling and servicing Ford and Maxwell cars. By the age of 20, Martin was already earning a respectable living, $3,000 to $4,000 a year, a small fortune at that time. It seemed that his life might settle comfortably into the automobile business. But in 1905, a single newspaper report changed everything. The Wright brothers, it said, had flown at Kitty Hawk for 100 seconds. To Martin, this was not just news, it was revelation. His mind caught fire. He could think of nothing else. The skies called to him, and he knew with absolute certainty that he, too, must fly. He returned home, brimming with excitement, and told his mother of his dream. She, remembering her own vision from decades earlier, looked into his eyes and said, "My son, if you can build a kite, you can build an airplane. Do it, and let me see it fly." That encouragement became the foundation of his determination. At 20 years old, Glenn Martin abandoned his car business and threw himself completely into aviation. He devoured every book on aeronautics he could find, studied every design, and set about constructing his first plane in a rented barn in Santa Ana. He worked without rest, pouring every dollar of his savings into his experiments. Neighbors mocked him, friends doubted him. His own father felt shame, calling him a foolish dreamer. But his mother never faltered. She stood by him, night after night, helping in whatever way she could. Even through Christmas and New Year's, they labored together, fashioning wings, frames, and engines. For 12 long months, they worked, and finally, by July 1909, the machine was ready. On a moonlit night, Martin and two helpers pushed the fragile airplane into a field. To hide from the curious eyes of neighbors, they waited until midnight. Then Martin climbed into the cockpit. The engine roared to life. His heart pounded. He pulled the controls, and suddenly, like a miracle, the machine lifted from the ground. It rose, trembling but steady. For the first time, Glenn L. Martin, son of Minter Martin, felt the air carry him as it had carried his mother in her dream. That moment, he would later say, was the most important of his entire life. From that night onward, his destiny was sealed. Martin Aircraft soon became a name of innovation and reliability. He built the great Mars flying boat, the mighty Marauder for the US Army, and the Mariner for Britain. He designed the China Clipper, the first aircraft to cross the Pacific, forever shrinking the vast ocean that had separated continents. And behind it all, there remained that thread of destiny, a dream in the night. A mother's encouragement, a child's determination, and a man's relentless ambition. Glenn Martin's life reminds us of something profound. Success is never born in a single moment. It grows from countless small efforts. The kites in the kitchen, the wagon in the wind, the skates forged by hand, the sleepless nights spent laboring over fragile wings. For Martin, those humble beginnings prepared him to endure the ridicule of neighbors, the doubts of his father, the endless obstacles of invention. And through it all, he kept his eyes fixed on the sky. He once said, "If a man keeps his eyes fixed on his purpose, no matter how difficult the road, he will one day arrive." That is the lesson Glenn L. Martin left us. A reminder that dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem, are within reach for those who work tirelessly, believe deeply, and refuse to surrender. Thank you, dear friends, for joining us on this journey through the life of Glenn L. Martin, the boy who built kites in his mother's kitchen, and the man who helped humanity conquer the skies. If you found inspiration in this story, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with friends who love history, and most importantly, subscribe to Memory Lane Media for more stories of courage, perseverance, and the timeless human spirit. And as always, we invite you to walk with us again down the many roads of memory.